About a little bit the challenges or the possibilities we can that we can achieve by integrating the customer in our storytelling. So that's your idea, and we're eager to listen to follow you.
Thank you very much. So I apologize that I speak no German, so this session is going to be in English. If anything is unclear, please let me know. I tend to speak very fast when I get excited, so slow me down if you don't understand anything, okay? So this is the agenda that I will follow. So I'm going to tell you a little story about a little history of our modern business models, and then I'm going to tell you about where this is going and enlisting customers, okay? So once upon a time, there was a time when all business transaction happens in one place, okay? And that place is the market, all right? So all business trades and transaction happens there. If there's any concern about the product, the transaction, they discuss there face to face. But then this has been the way of business for a long time. But then what happened is that technology came along, right? Technology, the first wave of technology that came along is transportation. Transportation basically allow people to do business with other people who are much further away, right? So as a result, what's the result of that? The result of that is great because the market becomes bigger, right? Now, there's another wave of technology that came and disrupted this market, and that is communication. Now, communication allows company to operate with much, much greater efficiency. So what does it allow a company to do? That also allows a company to grow bigger, right? Scale and become bigger. So you say that's wonderful, right? I have a big market, I have a big company, right? That's excellent. But that also created a problem. The problem it created is that it separated the market from the company, right? Therefore, as far as most of us can remember, nearly all of the business that we know of operates in what we call the two gears model, right? Basically, company have to acquire and they have to monetize, right? Okay. So remember, company used to only have to go to the market and sell. That's the only thing they have to do. Because of technology allow company to scale and market to get bigger, right? Now they have to do two things. They have to acquire and also monetize, right? So they focus on something called the transactional efficiency, right? And many big companies today are doing this really well. Okay, they can actually acquire globally and monetize, globally as well. The problem is that technology advancement doesn't stop. There's actually a new wave of technology that came along that disrupted this way of business again. Okay, and that is basically social media. Now, social media is very, very disruptive. There's actually a book that predicted that social media is going to be very predictive before social media is even mainstream. Right? This book is called Clue Train Manifesto. It is published in 1999. There were no Twitter in 1999. There were even Facebooks then. Okay, so but the main thesis of this book is that the market have changed again. Market have changed again. The new markets are conversations. Okay. Now, where do you think conversation happens today? Obviously, on social media, right? Okay, now let me ask you another question. If you are a practical-minded CEO or business owner, what would you do? You probably reason that, okay, the new markets are conversation, and people are having conversation on social media, so all I have to do is acquire on social media, right? Perfectly reasonable thing to conclusion to come to. Now, the problem is that, the market have already changed, right? If you take this reason, most people still focus on acquisition and monetization, even though the market landscape has completely changed, right? So now, they're still doing acquisition and monetization, but the problem is that under this new market, this is actually neither scalable nor sustainable, Why is that the case? Okay? One of the reasons is because digital acquisition is kind of strange. You don't actually keep what you acquire. You may run a really, really successful marketing campaign and get 1 million follower or get like maybe 1 million fan, but you don't actually keep those fan or follower. Mark Zuckerberg still keeps all those fans for you. Okay? So, what are you actually acquiring here? What are you actually acquiring? What do you think you're acquiring? I mean, this is different from the traditional sense of acquisition of a customer, right? You don't actually acquire a customer until you monetize them. So what are you acquiring there? What you're acquiring is basically people's short attention span, right? So it's true, you can monetize them while you get their attention. Yes, you can monetize them that, but people's attention shift away very quickly. What does that mean for your business? It means that very quickly, right, you will have to spend the money that you just earned from monetization to reacquire them back. Okay? Do you know how quickly people's attention shift away? Do you know what's the average attention span of American adult? How many seconds? Some of you are laughing. Maybe somebody have already discussed in the earlier talk in German that I don't know. So, yeah, 8.25 seconds, right? These goldfish have memory of 9 seconds. Right? Just to put that in context, right? So now, how can we turn? So now I feel a little bit left out because by not being able to understand German. Okay, so I had the pleasure to work with Jeffrey Moore. Right? The problem that we're trying to solve is how can we turn this two-gear model into a sustainable model in the social age? Okay, how can we do that? Now, after we try to do this kind of mental experiment and do a lot of studies on case studies after case study, we come to the conclusion that with 2 gear, it's just not possible. It's just like, you know, when before business was operating under this 2 gear, right? They only have to focus on 1 gear. They just have to go to the market and sell, right? But transportation and communication technology came along, disrupted the market. So now they cannot just go to the market and sell, right? You can't do that. It's not scalable. You have to go acquire and monetize, right? Same thing. Now with social media, 2 gear is not enough. You need 2 extra gear, right? You have to, we have to have the first of the 2 extra gear is engagement, okay? So what engagement allows you to do is to help you sustain your monetization, right? What happens when you engage with your audience? You capture their attention for a longer period of time, right? Now, when you capture their attention for a long time, you can monetize them longer. Okay? The second of the 2 extra gear is enlistment. Now, enlistment is a fairly new concept. Not many people know about it. Okay? But it's actually very, very important. Enlistment is all about leveraging your customer to help you do work that's normally done internally by your employees. Okay? Think of them as advocacy, right? When you have an advocate, they actually go out and spread the word of mouth for on your brand's behalf, right? And this work is normally done by your marketers, right? So basically, advocacy is a form of enlistment, but enlistment can actually do a lot more than that, okay? So we'll discuss that. Okay, now enlistment actually help you scale your acquisition. Typically, in any company, right, there's usually a lot more customer than they have employees. So when you actually enlist your customer to help you acquire, it's actually much more scalable. Your marketers don't have to do all the work, right? So, in the social era, this is actually very important because today, in this where we have so much information out there on social media with the click of the search engine, right? Consumer actually trust other consumer more than they trust the brand. So not only is this more effective, not only is this more scalable, it's actually more effective if you actually leverage your customer to help you acquire. Now, when you have all 4 of this gear all spinning in sync, basically you create what we call the viral loop. The viral loop is a positive feedback loop that's going to sustain itself, right? Now, there's a caveat to that. The caveat is that you have to get all 4 gears spinning at the same speed, right? If one of the gears slows down or one of them stops, right, your whole loop cannot go faster than the slowest gear, right? Makes sense, right? Perfectly. Okay. Now, as I said before, companies have hundreds of years of practice on acquisition and monetization, but What they haven't had a lot of practice is engagement and enlistment. Okay, they haven't had a lot of practice with that. Now, engagement and enlistment are both pretty new concepts, especially enlistment. Right now, engagement is, I would say, probably 5 years ago when I talked to brands, companies, they still don't know why they need to engage with the customer. What is this engagement mean? Why do I need to engage my customer? 5 years later today, every single company that I talk to know they need to engage. They may not know what the best way to engage is. They may not know what the ROI of engagement. They may not know who to engage. But one thing that they do agree with everybody else is that they need to engage. Okay? They all need to engage. The thing about enlistment today is like engagement 5 years ago. Today, not many people know about enlistment. But as you can see, this is one of the very critical gear that closes this feedback loop. Right? So it's one that actually allow this loop to be sustainable in the long term. Okay. So how should you think about engagement and enlistment? The way you should think about them is really that they are two ends of a spectrum. Okay. So engagement is not just one thing, right? Some people say engagement is like liking your product, reading your blogs, right, or sharing, right? Those are all engagement. They're all different forms of engagement, right? So engagement actually is a whole spectrum of activity. There's a whole spectrum of activity all the way from consume to share to curate to create to co-create, right? So consuming would be like, the really shallow type of engagement, right? Just watching a video, reading your blogs, and then maybe they get a little bit deeper, start sharing your content, right? Retweeting it, right? And then to help you curate and create, it goes deeper and deeper, right? So when they actually started to co-create with you, they are definitely enlisted. What is co-creation? Co-creation is basically the collaboration between customer and the brand to create value, right? But keep in mind, customers are not obligated to collaborate with the brand at all, right? So when they are collaborating with you, these customers are definitely enlisted. But enlistment actually happens much earlier, right? Like I said before, when they actually start sharing your content, retweeting it, they are helping your marketing do their job, right? So you should think of enlistment is just the deepest form of engagement, right? And engagement is just a really shallow enlistment, right? Maybe not consume, but starting with sharing is a really light form of enlistment. Okay? Clear? So far, so good? Do you guys have enough coffee for lunch? Okay, good. You guys are laughing. That means you are paying attention. Good. Okay. So you may ask me, hey, Michael, what does this have to do, anything to do with digital storytelling? The answer is this, right? The most compelling stories are brand narratives that are co-created with customers. Let me tell you what that means, okay? So maybe it's helpful to understand what is the difference between a story and a narrative. Most people think of narrative and story are exactly the same thing. They're synonymous. It's actually not exactly the same. Why would we need two words for the same thing? Right? They're slightly different. And John Hagel actually put this in a very good way. So basically, John Hagel is he's actually the author of The Power of Pull. He's actually the chairman at the Center for the Edge at Deloitte. He basically says that the main difference between story and narrative is that, like, one, the stories are usually never about the listener, right? Think of all the story that you ever heard before. Any story, right? Think of all the story that you ever heard before, right? Usually, the story is about the storyteller himself, or it's about somebody else, right? The storyteller is telling a story about somebody else or telling a story about himself, right? But the story is never about the listener. It's never about you, right? But on the other hand, the narrative is all about you, right? One of the reasons that stories are so powerful is because we can relate to those stories, right? Okay, this character in the story, he had the same experience I do, same background as I do. I can relate to him, right? So that's why stories are so powerful, because we relate to it. But if the story is about you, they are infinitely relatable. You can relate to it infinitely well, because it's about you, right? So that's why narratives tend to be much, much more powerful than a story, right? Now, there's another difference is that story typically have a well structure, right? It has a beginning, has a middle, and has an end. It has a well discourse, right? Well-defined discourse. Whereas narrative are open-ended. it's determined pretty much by you, right? Because the story, it's about you, and it's open-ended, so you have the power to determine how the story ends. Not only determining how the story ends, how it actually unfolds, right? How it progresses. So, therefore, when you have this, it's actually much more motivating. It gives people a sense of autonomy, right? I can have the power to change the story, to change the course of how this story goes and how it unfolds, right? So that's why this is the difference between a story and narrative, right? So let me give you an example of what such a narrative is, right? So Barclays Bank actually have a company narrative. The company narrative is that we are your bank and we listen to you. Remember, it's about you, the listener, the audience, right? Okay. So how did they do this? They basically have they created a community where the customers can submit ideas. People can vote on the ideas, and basically they have the newest idea and the most popular idea. They see which ones they can, and then they actually periodically they will implement some of these most popular ideas and bring them to life. Okay? Keep in mind that this is a narrative that's co-created with the customer. Basically, there's, for example, there's actually this is one of the ideas that they actually implemented, right? So basically, people said that, you know, they want to get more out of their technology, right? And they can actually basically tweet the digital ego SOS, and then they will bring, why don't you bring these people to us? When we are stuck without technology, we're not necessarily at the branch. We are maybe at our home, right? Maybe we may be shopping, right? So we get stuck anytime, right, in our life. We're not at your branch. So why don't you bring the digital egos out to help us, right? So that's the idea, right? Basically, they did it, right? Basically, they basically allow a bunch of, these digital egos roaming the street of London, helping people who need help with a digital device. Okay? So this is how they listen to you. This is an example of how they listen to you. But keep in mind, this is just one of the ideas, right? There's many, many more of ideas that could come up by the consumer, right? The story changes, it's determined by the listener, by the audience. Any idea could be implemented next, right? For example, give you some financial headspace, right? So this one can be implemented, like for example, people said that it's important to support young people. So the bank listens to you. They will provide education for the young people, right? So can you see that this is not a story that's created by the brand themselves, right? It's a narrative that's created by the brand collaborating, co-creating with the customer, okay? So one of the biggest questions that I often get asked is that, okay, that sounds all great, but why would the customer co-create a story with you? Why would a customer co-create to do anything for you, right? Why would they co-create this for you for free? Why do you think that is the case, right? The reason is because it's actually very self-centered oriented, right? So first, it's because it actually creates value, right? And the value had to be valuable to the customer themselves, the audience himself. So first, you have to create value for the person himself. And that you know how to do, right? Basically, you just have to provide content that's easy to consume, right? That's relevant, useful, interesting. You content marketers know all about this, right? Probably more than I do, right? All right. Then you basically make it really easy and rewarding to share, right? If you see you're already consuming the content already, right? Why don't you just click one button to share with your friends, right? Now, when you click that one button and share with your friends, then the value increases, right? You're not just benefiting yourself, you're benefiting people who are connected to you. Your friends, your connections, your followers, right? So on and so forth. Now, if you actually make it really easy and rewarding to curate and create content, then basically they will start creating content and curating content for you. Now, the value that they create is even bigger, right? You are benefiting people who you may not even know, strangers who you may not never even met before, right? As long as they have the same interest, same problem, right? They could find that solution or that information that you created, and they will get the benefit, right? So you're creating a value for a much bigger group. Now if you actually make it really easy and rewarding to co-create, then basically you're going to benefit the company, and the company could even turn that into a product or service that will benefit millions and millions of people, right? You create much, much greater value, right? So the point is that you get people to start consuming, to do a little bit more and engage deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper to the point where they become co-creating with you, right? But as they go deeper, they're starting benefiting a bigger and bigger group of people, right? They start benefiting themselves, right? And then they start benefiting their friends, people who are connected to them. And then they're even benefiting people who they may not know, right? And then they're benefiting the company and who can actually take their idea and make them real and benefiting millions and millions of people, right? Value creation. But it all started with himself, right? Okay, so you said, that sounds great, but do you know how hard it is to even get a customer to open the email? Most of the time when I send them a marketing email, they would just say, delete, right? How do you get them from consuming to co-creating? Sounds easy, but how do you actually do it? This is where technology came to help, right? Basically, Gartner identified gamification as an emerging technology in 2011 in their Hype Cycle report. So gamification basically drives certain behavior. It's a technology that actually changes human behavior, okay? It's not just about rewards and badges and points like that. That's only the most rudimentary form of gamification, right? But the very next year after Gartner published this report, the industry kind of exploded, right? And then the problem is that, like, people don't really know what gamification is all about anyway, right? So then very next year, they published another report saying 80% of the currently gamified app will fail. Okay? That's extremely high failure rate, okay? So one of the reasons for this is because gamification is not just a technology. You have to understand behavior, you have to understand human psychology, you have to understand behavior economics, sociology, you have to understand all the stuff, right? So I won't have time to go into all this theory with you, but there's one principle that's actually very important in understanding how gamification works, and that's the concept of flow, okay? Anybody here actually heard of the concept of flow? Nobody? No psychologists here? Okay. All right. So flow is a mental state that's discovered by a renowned psychologist by the name of Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. He's a Hungarian, and that is the correct way to pronounce his name. So he basically characterized this state because he found that some people, when they are actually immersed in what they do, they go into this state where they almost forget about everything else. They forget about the time past. They forget about the fact that they're hungry or they're tired. They're just so immersed in what they do, they just keep doing it and just forget everything else. Right? That's the state of flow. Like, I feel like I'm in a state of flow now, right? So, when I'm so immersed in what I'm doing, right? So, now, Csikszentmihalyi not only identified this state, he also basically identified the precondition to go into flow. Basically, that is the challenge that you face have to match your skill, right? If the challenge is too great compared to your skill, right, then what happened? You can't do it because it's too challenging, right? So you get frustrated, you get this anxiety mode, right? If the challenge is too low compared to your skill, then you also feel it's kind of boring, right? Okay, so basically flow is this fine line, this really, really fine line between certainty and uncertainty. How many people here like certainty? That's it? Nobody likes certainty? I don't believe it. This is German. This is Germany, right? Everybody likes to have certainty, right? But if people also, everything is so certain, you could do it with your eyes closed, right? It's also boring. And nobody likes boring stuff, right? Even the Germans. Right? All right. So people like to be aroused, like to be challenged a little bit. But if it's too challenging, then they also get into this worry and frustration state, right? So it's a fine line between certainty and uncertainty, right? It's just drawn like a big wedge here, but it's actually a very fine line. Let me ask you, how often do you experience flow in your lifetime? Not very often, do you, right? You experience it sometime in your lifetime, but not very often, right? Because it's a really fine line, very difficult to achieve. What people often don't understand is that people's skill or ability is not static. It changes. It changes from time to time, right? In fact, people get better at what they do, right? So even if you are in the state of flow right now, over time, you eventually move into the state of boredom. Okay? That's why people get bored when they do the same job over and over again for many, many years, right? People get bored, right? So how do you fix this? Well, to fix this is really easy, right? Basically, you give them a task that's more difficult, right? Then you move back into flow, right? The problem is that in real life, it's really, really difficult to find a task with just the right amount of difficulty to move them back into flow. It's not easy, right? If you did a good job in your marketing campaign, your boss may say, okay, now let's do the same thing again. So if that's the same thing again, it's still kind of boring, right? Because you already done it, right? But your boss may also say, now let's scale it to, the 5 neighboring countries, right? Then you say, uh-oh, this is too hard, right? So if it's a little bit too hard, it's fine, right? What that means is that you have a shallow learning curve, right? You have to learn, acquire a little bit more skill and ability, and very quickly move back into flow, right? But sometimes your boss may say, okay, now let's go conquer the world. Let's scale this entire world. And then you say, holy crap, this is too hard, right? So basically, this is when you have a steep learning curve. It takes you a long time to acquire enough skill and ability to move back into this state of flow. All right? Okay, that's why we don't experience flow very much, right? But there is one industry that have mastered getting people into flow. Any guess what the industry is? Pharmaceuticals? If there is a pill that I could take to get into flow, I'll buy it. So there is one industry, and that industry is the gaming industry. Okay? Good games are designed to maximize flow. Right? Have you played Angry Birds? Or like Clash of Clans, Candy Crush, right? Do any play those games? Nobody play? Okay. Very different. Yeah, Germany. Interesting audience, right? But, okay, how about sports? Do you play sports? Yeah. Do you go ski? Yeah. Do you play tennis, right? Those are all games, okay? We just like different kinds of games. That's all, right? So anyway, good games are designed to maximize flow, right? So in this case, I'm talking about video games. So how do you think they do that? They do that by basically zigzagging along this flow zone, right? But what do they must do to achieve this? What does the game designer have to do in order to achieve this? Basically, they will have to design the game in such a way that they control the level of difficulty in a very, very precise way, right? And that precise way is this. Basically, every next step that the player takes have to be a baby step relative to the skill they already acquired. So keep in mind, this relative to the skill they already acquired is the key, okay? It's not that every step had to be a baby step. If every step is a baby step, what will happen? Yeah, everybody gets bored, right? You stop playing it. You will not engage with that kind of game, right? It's boring, right? So what does this mean? It's a baby step relative to the skill they require. But keep in mind, take a look at this graph right here, right? These steps actually gets bigger and bigger, right? When you go out here, it's even bigger. If this is not big enough, you just go further out, right? It gets harder and harder, right? So let's just illustrate this with this example. So this could be the next step. It's a big step, right? The early steps are easy, right? But it gets harder and harder. But relative to the skill you already acquire, this is the skill you already acquire because you get here. This step, even though it's a big step, it's a baby step. Looks like a baby step. If that doesn't make sense, let me illustrate an example for you, right? This is Angry Bird level 100. You guys have obviously not played any Angry Birds, so, right? So you would not know how to solve this level. This will look like impossible for you, right? But I guarantee you, if you actually play Angry Bird level 0 to level 99, this exact same level will look very easy. Nothing has changed. This exact same level will look very, very easy. Why? Because when you play level 1 to level 99, you learn how to play the game, right? You learn how to play the game better, right? So relative to the skill you already acquire, which is during playing of level 0, level 1 to level 99, you learn how to play the game. You acquire skill, you acquire ability. Even though this is a very difficult step, it looks easy, right? And you feel achievable, and you want to play it. Right? So this is how games create this habit formation, almost like a behavioral addiction. Okay? So now how do we apply this principle to gamification? Basically, today there's actually a lot of gamification tools out there. Plenty, right? Hundreds and maybe thousands. Thousands of tools out there. Okay. So now, every gamification tool have one thing in common, is that they have a feedback. And the feedback have a characteristic time scale, right? You can arrange these tools according to how quickly they feedback to the consumer, to the player, right? This is the feedback time scale. So every gamification tool has feedback, right? Every gamification tool fits somewhere in this spectrum. I just highlighted 7 here, but there's, like I said, there's thousands, right? Every one of them fits somewhere here. Just look at how long and how quickly they feedback to the player. Okay, now, this spectrum is very useful. It's actually patented. So the application of the spectrum to the community space is actually granted a patent last October. So now think of the points are really easy games, right? Basically, you just do whatever you need to do and you get the points right away. For example, a loyalty program at a hotel or at a frequent flyer program, right? You get the point, immediately you fly, immediately you stay in the hotel, right? But badges are like status. You have to get to some threshold. So the feedback of a badge is slower because you have to wait a while before you get to that threshold, right? So badges is longer feedback time scale. So think of the tools on the left-hand side are really easy game to achieve. And the tools on the right-hand side are really difficult game to achieve, right? The benefit of having a really easy game is that they work really fast. Because of that, it actually motivates a lot of people. It engages a lot of people, right? Now, the downside of having a really easy game is that people master them quickly, right? And once people master them, they feel bored and they stop playing, right? So the gamification stops working. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, these tools are very, very difficult to master, so people never get bored, right? But because they're so difficult that only a few people will actually engage with them, right? So now if you want to use this type of tool to engage, to get people to do something, right? What tool do you use? Do you pick a tool that engage a lot of people, that drive a lot of behavior in a lot of people, but stop working very quickly? Or do you want to pick a tool that works for a long time, but only drive behavior in a few people? Ideally, you want both ends of the spectrum, right? You want both ends of the spectrum, but how? Right? So this is where you learn from the game designers, right? Basically, you give them some points at first, right? Once they get the hang of getting points, you give them the first batch. When they get their first batch, they get really excited. They say, I'm going to do more, right? I'm going to like share more. I'm going to post more stuff, right? And then when they get their first batch, they get really excited. Second batch, they're still excited. Fifth batch, they're starting to get a hang of it. When they get their 10th batch, then they say, I'm starting to get bored. That's when you say, okay, now you know what? Your friend Bob is on the leaderboard, but you're not. And then you're going to say, what? Bob is on the leaderboard? I'm not? I'm going to do more, right? So you get them to play a game on successively longer and longer feedback time scale, right? So this is how we actually get the consumer from consume to share to curate to create to co-create, right? We get them to, don't get your consumer to co-create with you the first day they come to the community. It's not going to work, okay? You can pay them to do it, but they're going to ask for more money, right? And it's not going to be sustainable, right? Just get them to come. Just read something, watch a video, have fun, enjoy, right? If you like something, then we give them some badge and some points, right? And then you get them to, if you like something, just share a little bit with your friend, right? Get them to share once, twice, right? And then you slowly move them to the point where they start to, help you curate content and create content, and eventually to the point where they actually start co-creating with you, right? It's a process. It's not a one-shot thing, okay? So there's a statistics Gartner published in 2012. Not 2012, right? Basically, they said that community in the wild have failure rate of 70%. 70% of community in the wild fail, okay? This is not the data that we see, okay? The data that we see is almost the opposite of that. We see 90% success rate, okay? So this is actually what made us kind of say, okay, what's our secret ingredient, right? Basically, we decided that it's probably, gamification probably have a huge contribution to that, and that's why we decided to patent it. And we were actually granted a patent, so it was actually a good thing. Okay, so that's it. If you want to read more about other works I do, there's 2 books I've written on Science and Social and Science and Social 2. The 4 gears model is in Science and Social 2. Some of the gamification stuff is actually in both of these books. So let me open up to questions.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Auch hier würde ich eine Frage zulassen. One question, is there any? Was there any question? So if not, then I'm...
If not, then I say something.
Yes.
That's always interesting. We have a few copies of that book at our stand, so if you think that's interesting, feel free to pass by and grab the book.
Okay, but still one question from my side. So when I want to go this step, did I get it right? First of all, I need to have the understanding and also bring the understanding to my management about the value of co-created content, and then also add the gamification process to it, so customers are really engaged in a long term on co-create content, right?
Yeah, so basically, remember, this talk is about co-creating a narrative for the brand, right? What is your brand about? The brand should be about the customers, right? So you could co-create a brand narrative with your customer, right? And the reason that we use gamification is that normally a customer wouldn't co-create with you in the first day, okay? And so gamification is just a process to get them to the point where they willingly help you create, lots of content and co-creating product and services with you, right?
Great.
Are you sure there's no questions? Have I lost all of you? Is that because of English?
Thank you again, Michael. And
Thank you.
He's still here for the afternoon, so you can. He's certainly open for more talks and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you.